What's up, everybody? Blessed be. My name is Mannun, and you are watching Witch in the Working, where we will be discussing all things witchy in and around, throughout and about, above, below, and beyond. Nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes, and everybody steps in the proverbial shitbox from time to time. It's all part of life, and frankly, a lot of times, it's what we do best. As witches, we're always learning and always seeking and striving to better ourselves spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and magically. One of the best ways to help this growth and development is to take off the gloves, get in the ring with your shadow self, and get ready to romance your way into an amazing, neutral, and well-balanced relationship with your darker side. Roll the intro. Welcome back, everybody. So in this episode of Witch in the Working, we are going to be talking about the shadow self. What is the shadow self? One of the most famous and world-renowned psychologists to ever grace this planet with his wisdom and knowledge was Carl Jung. In Jungian psychology, the shadow self is the unknown dark side of the personality. This, in fact, is where much of our negativity, judgment, and perceptions of ourselves and others are stored and kept from being exposed, as to not be allowed to be displayed in our conscious light, so to speak. It is the keeper of all aspects of ourselves that we don't like and all of the unacceptable qualities that we judge in others. Because of these aspects being so guarded and tucked away, many of us as unconscious humans play out a cycle over and over again of blindness and spiritual and emotional and mental stalemate throughout life. This, in fact, does not allow us to grow in these categories as we should, keeping us spiritually stunted or handicapped in our quest forward in seeking balance and consciousness. So I actually looked up a bunch of research about the shadow self to try and get into the science of it by studying up on Carl Jung and all of the sciencey, super elaborate techno talk of psychology and all that psychobabble, so to speak. Not gonna happen for two very important reasons. One, I don't want you to fall asleep during this video, and two, I don't want to fall asleep during this video. So I'm going to teach you guys the witchy way of the shadow self experience as it was taught to me by my high priest and priestess 20 years ago. So let's get into it. So, what is the shadow self in simplified witchy terms? It is the side of your ego and personality that demonstrates negativities towards yourself and others. Example, you're at a kick-ass little pagan pride day event going on at your local yearly witchy festival. You have your own witchy merchandise booth set up this year with all of the top of the line kicking little charms, stones, herbs, books, candles, and knickknacks, and you just know that you have the booth of all booths when it comes to providing crafty items. But then some other new guy sets up a booth next to yours, and it just so happens he has even better crafty little charms, stones, herbs, books, candles, and knickknacks. Your heart sinks as you realize people start gravitating to his booth. You start to feel a little resentment towards him, but more than that, you start to feel jealous of this person, in fact, depressed and hopeless about yourself. This is the shadow self coming out to play and sending you the message and emotions to feel resentment, jealousy, and self-sorrow. Example number 2, a more realistic one that we probably experience at least once a week, at least I do. You're driving home in traffic from work. Traffic sucks as usual. The dude in front of you is in the fast lane doing 60 miles an hour when the average speed is 70, which means, in reality, everyone's actually driving like 80. But not you, because you're stuck behind the jackass on his cell phone doing 60 in the fast lane. Your anger starts to swell, your impatience for this self-centered whale dick comes to a head, blood pressure's up 25 points, and your shadow self has now officially joined you in the passenger seat, and the son of a bitch won't even put on his seatbelt. And there you have it, just like that. Your anger, impatience, and anxiety all brought into being and displayed on the front stage starring act of your present consciousness, and the lead singer in this act is your shadow self. So, where does this shadow self come from? How did I end up with this special little friend pulling and tugging at me like a child begging for attention when I'm at my most vulnerable? Well, in fact, we are born without this shadow self. When we are born into this world, we are in fact pure and perfect in our consciousness. What does this mean? We're born without the judgment and negativities that plague us as unconscious beings in our lives. When we're still babies, we haven't been conditioned as of yet to know these rights and wrongs, so to speak. As we progress through life, our parents start the process of conditioning. Soon, other family members join in, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, grandparents, all help start the process of conditioning, polluting our minds to begin to judge and create emotional attachment and programming towards people, places, things, events, experiences, etc. Soon, school, church, and other social institutions begin to follow suit and really drive these spikes of darkness deep into the fabric of our precious world, planting the seeds of our shadow self to be born and grow. And grow this shadow self does, and for the most of us, quite large. In fact, in a large percentage of the population, the shadow self is dominant in us most of the time throughout life, especially in modern societies that most of us live in today. So it is in fact our parents and the people and institutions around us that begin to tell us who, what, when, where, and how is perceived as good and what is perceived as bad as per their standards. Example, if you grew up with your influencers telling you that the cute little teddy bear is so cute and cuddly and comforting and adorable and give it hugs and kisses, etc., etc., you're going to be conditioned to grow up thinking and projecting these thoughts and feelings towards the teddy bear. However, if your influencers raise you saying stay away from the teddy bear, it's bad, it's no good, it causes discomfort, and it just utterly is a terrible, evil teddy bear, you will in fact grow up conditioned that the teddy bears are bad and horrible and you shouldn't go near them. We are all conditioned over our entire lives to judge and either vilify or praise situations, circumstances, peoples, places, and things. It's not our fault, it's just the way it is. Different cultures are internally conditioned to accept and reject different circumstances, people, places, and things per their culture and beliefs. So don't kick yourself about some of your negativities and judgments, as you're just a victim of the standard cycle of conditioning that just about everybody as human beings experiences. It's part of life and it's natural. Some of the byproducts or symptoms of the shadow self are, for instance, the strain and stubbornness of always wanting to be right. When we have a situation or circumstance in our life, we are very connected to it and have an undying passion to guard it because we identify with it, and therefore to be wrong about this idea would in our minds strip away a piece of ourselves. When two people argue over who is right and who's wrong, this is where this comes into play. Neither one wants to give any leeway to the other because in fact that would be losing and therefore possibly losing a piece of your identity. And that's the thought and idea anyways. Most of the time these arguments are over ideas. There are no right and wrong with ideas. They are just ideas. They're neutral. Same, there is no good or bad with ideas, as it's simply just an idea, it's neutral. Now, acting out these ideas could pose a different story. Nobody has to be right or wrong. If an argument starts, just say, okay, we agree to disagree and move on. The shadow self can cause you to suppress experiences. If you live your life in the same old cycle on a daily basis, you'll never get to experience new and potentially very successful adventures in life. The shadow self can keep us in fear from breaking our cycle of habits as human beings. Certain conditioning and beliefs that we have been raised with as part of the shadow self will tend to be lurking around every corner when we're presented with a new adventure, path, or journey that would otherwise possibly end up creating a whole new, exciting discovery for us. If we've been conditioned and our shadow self created to not allow us to break free of the anxieties and fears of breaking our comfortable routines, quote, getting out of our comfort zone, end quote, we will never know what could have been or would have been because we're stuck in the same old that the shadow self wants to keep us tied into. The shadow self causes us to judge others. Most of us, again, are conditioned to be and act a certain way. We are conditioned to be brought up to the standards of our influencers. We're told and influenced to believe that certain clothes should be worn and foods to be eaten and schools to go to and gods to believe in and pets to own, cars to drive, places to live, and how to act. All standards and beliefs set in motion from the time we're born, programming our minds and creating our ego and shadow selves the whole time. Because of the conditioned standards, you will tend to see others who don't necessarily measure up to these standards, and then whether consciously or unconsciously, you begin to judge that person, place, or thing because it doesn't measure up to your standards. Example. "Oh my God, look at the haircut on that guy. I wouldn't be caught dead looking like that. What a loser." Or the opposite. Example, "Look at that amazing car that guy's driving. He's obviously so very rich. I wished I was that rich." Now you feel sorry for yourself. Shadow self rises once again. The shadow self causes us to have a filter on our experience of reality. What does this mean? We can be so dominated by the negativity and influence of the shadow self that it literally construes our perception of reality. Our negative beliefs stored with the shadow self can cause us to not see what truly lies in front of us because our stubbornness and conditioning keeps supporting our need and want for things to coincide with our identity, not giving any leeway to another idea, belief, or circumstance. The shadow self will cause you to project your negativity onto others. My high priestess used to tell us all the time that if we make a huge judgment about someone or something, we should in turn look in a mirror, because most likely this is in fact something that we see in ourselves and choose to project it onto someone else to make ourselves feel better. Misery loves company, so to speak. The shadow self is very tricky like this, and you should stay aware of these situations and always become conscious when moments like this arise to self-discovery. So what do we do to remedy the shadow self? First of all of these negativities and circumstances of the shadow self, we call these things shadow traits. Some shadow traits are anger, being critical, fearful, lazy, controlling, selfish, weak, and pathetic. These are usually traits that we don't want to show others and especially don't want to show ourselves. When they arise in the shadow self, little child arises and starts tugging at your skirt or shirt, it's in fact wanting attention and wanting to interact with you so that it can feed off of your energy and grow. Why does the shadow self insist on resurfacing? Because like most every other living thing in the world, it does not want to die. If you ignore the shadow self, just as if you ignore anything in life, it will cease to exist. Again, the shadow self is like a little child, hence it's sometimes also called the child self, and it wants to bother you from time to time so that it doesn't die. This is why no matter how much you practice shadow working, you're going to occasionally fall back into unconscious mannerisms and ego-driven traits. It's natural, and some believe even necessary from time to time. For instance, sometimes a sense of self-pity can be turned into a passion, energy, and drive to do better in life. Hence, a negative just became a positive. If life gives you lemons, make lemonade type of situation. We don't want to turn our backs on the shadow self. We want to learn to work with it. To make peace with the shadow, we eliminate the internal war we're always battling with, and in turn, our outer world will begin to mirror our inner world, hopefully bringing us a peace that is the true secret to having an amazing life. For a person to be at true peace within and without everything in their life, they are the richest person in the world. Whether you want to believe it or not, and I know it's cliche, but money truly doesn't bring peace and happiness. Just look at all the multimillionaires that have committed suicide or turned to alcohol and or drugs because they came to realize that having all the monetary value in the world still didn't bring them the peace and happiness they so desperately sought after. Again, so many of us are ruled by our shadow self, causing strain and in general unhealthiness in and about the world around us. I think most all of us can agree with this, that basically people can suck sometimes. Okay, so coming back full circle, how do we get rid of the shadow self? Well, that's the thing and the secret of it all. You don't. The answer is not to get rid of the shadow self. Most of us need the shadow self in our lives. So what do? We in fact embrace the shadow self. If we embrace the shadow self, which contains all the parts of ourselves that we try to hide, deny, or suppress, we can incorporate and uncover many gifts and treasures that can give us wisdom and experiences that we could never discover any other way. In fact, embracing the shadow self will make us a complete and whole, spiritually wise person. We are in fact embracing our defects to come forth and teach us for the powerful teachers that they are. Beliefs, ideas, and situations that once held us back now become energy for our spiritual growth, hopes, and dreams moving forward. Embracing our shadows allows us to reclaim the power we once gave away. When we're at peace within ourselves, our self-esteem no longer depends on the approval of others. Our own sense of self-worth is no longer at the mercy of how other people feel about us. When we receive the gifts of our shadow self, our wounds are transformed into wisdom, and the parts of us we once believed to be our deepest flaws are revealed as our greatest strengths. To embrace our shadow self, the concept to doing this is called reintegration. You want to in fact unite the opposites. Examine yourself. What are some of the weaknesses or shadow traits that you see in yourself? Acknowledge them without judgment. Simply say to yourself, I'm greedy or lazy or easily pissed off quite a bit. These aren't who you are. They are simply things that you've been conditioned to believe in and reactions programmed over time. When you begin to feel like one of these shadow traits is going to arise and show itself, simply acknowledge this is about to happen. Just standing outside of yourself for one brief second and acknowledging that the little child shadow self is tugging at your pant leg again should in fact right away start to calm you down a little, as the acknowledgement and realization that this isn't necessarily you can keep you from steamrolling your mind into a further spiraling descension into the unconscious chaos of a full-blown emotional meltdown. Don't judge yourself and be all mad because you started to get mad, for instance. Simply say, wow, there's that shadow child self again. Ha! You almost had me, but not this moment, not right now. And then just be. No judgment, just balanced and at peace. Wash, rinse, repeat. Throughout the course of a day, you may end up doing this at least 20 or 30 times, and that's okay. It is what it is. Just keep up the practice and surely your life will begin to become clearer and more focused, and most importantly, more at peace. What ultimately begins to happen is that you start to become more conscious or present. You begin to realize that all that matters is this moment. To worry, have anxiety, be nervous, all of those are symptoms and emotions that are tied in with the future events and that haven't in fact occurred yet. Why should you feel these things if they're projected at circumstances or events that haven't even happened yet? Most all of the time, by the time the event or circumstance occurs, it wasn't nearly as bad as you thought it was going to be. Vice versa, being angry or sad, for instance, is most likely going to be over something that happened in the past. I mean, you can't be angry or sad about something that hasn't happened yet. That's insane. And if the episode you're angry or sad about has already passed, there's nothing you can do about it. So take it for what it's worth and move on. The point is, don't suffer about it. Suffering destroys people and isn't necessary. Pick and choose your things to be upset about. Don't let every little thing bother you in the end. This is a direct disturbance from your shadow self. So to narrow it all back down to a few simple steps so you can carry along a shadow work technique as in your daily life is as follows. A shadow trait starts to arise into your present consciousness. Acknowledge this is happening. Take a deep breath in and release. Examine and tell yourself what shadow trait you are experiencing. It doesn't matter why. Take another deep breath in and imagine a mighty ocean wave sweeping over the shadow trait. As the wave goes back out into the ocean, it in fact takes the shadow trait with it, leaving you calm, at peace, and in this moment. Give it a shot a few times and see how it works for you. Again, you don't have to let the little things in life bring you down and out. Those little nips and bites at you throughout a day that cause you irritation and overall nonsense. Sweep them away. Wait for the next one to come. And when it does, don't judge it or yourself. Just let the wave of consciousness sweep it away. I've included a pathworking in the description below. I strongly recommend that you listen to this. In this pathworking, you'll meet your shadow self personally and learn to identify and embrace your shadow. Again, and it's not about getting rid of and killing your shadow self. It's about learning to live in balance with your shadow self. Balance is everything in life. A balanced life is a peaceful and fulfilled life. I'll leave you with one of my favorite stories. There was once a mighty king who had everything he could ever dream of having in life. However, he still suffered from sadness and all of the other shadow traits, just like everyone else. He sent out for all of the wise men across the lands to gather and show him a way to fulfill his life and bring true peace within. None of them could bring him the answer he desired. Finally, an old witch queen ambled forth and handed the mighty king a humble wooden bracelet carved of oak. The king let out a mighty arrogant and sarcastic laugh and said, "How's this supposed to bring me peace of mind?" The old witch queen stated, "Read the inscription carved on the bracelet, Lord." The inscription said the simple words, "This too shall pass." The old witch queen explained to the king that in times of sorrow, sadness, frustration, anger, jealousy, etc., simply read the inscription on your bracelet, that this too shall pass, as nothing stays forever. Vice versa, in times of great happiness, excitement, and joy and pleasures, also read the inscription on the bracelet, that this too shall pass. This will in fact bring the balance into your life and the peace that comes with the balance. So, this is going to wrap up this episode of Witch in the Working. Have you ever worked with the shadow self before? Tell us in the comments below your experience and let us know any awesome techniques you may have learned. I challenge you to work with your shadow self for 21 days. That's it, 21 short days. I guarantee you begin experiencing a tremendous difference in your life. Give it a shot and then let us know in the comments below of your experience. I love you guys and gals. Click the subscribe button below and ring that little bell to be reminded of the next future episodes to come. Give me a thumbs up or down and I'll see you all next week. See you later.